Hi, I'm Angela Slatter. I'm an Australian writer and I am here today being interviewed by my best friend and periodic collaborator, Lisa Hannett.
And I'm Lisa Hannett. I'm the author of over 60 short stories, but my most recent project is my first novel, Lament for the Afterlife. Okay, so we wanted to start today by talking about collaboration. So people often ask us how we started working together, and they also ask us how we work together. So I thought we would start with the first part. How did we start working together on collaborative projects?
Okay, well, as you know, because you were there, we met at Clarion South in 2009, and a few months after that, an editor approached me about writing a dragon story. And I had never written a dragon story. I was familiar with the concept of dragons, but didn't really feel confident with the story. And I said, do you mind if I bring Lisa in and we'll try a collaborative effort? And he said that would be fine. So I wrote my 2,500 words and ran out of ideas and sent it off to you in the hope that
we would continue each other's sentences
Exactly.
the way that we just have. And it worked out really well. So that continued into critiquing each other's work and handing things back and forth. And then that story, the dragon story, turned out to be the February Dragon,
which won the Aurealis Award in 2010?
For Best Fantasy Short Story. So that's how we started. So let's move on to how we work together. So that was one story, but obviously by now we've done a few collections together and individual stories. So I thought we could go over what our process is. Perhaps using Midnight and Moonshine as an example, because I think that's a really good overarching example. So let's go back to that hotel room at the con.
Let's do. Midnight and Moonshine is basically a reimagining of Norse mythology. And it began with the idea that Ragnarok was an apocalypse for the gods alone, so that the rest of the world was left godless, I suppose, in terms of Norse gods. They were all gone. But we're at SwanCon, which is a convention in Perth, Australia, and sitting in the hotel room, and we had a giant sketchbook and pens, coloured pens, and just started throwing ideas out and listing chapter/story titles.
Because we knew we wanted it to be an overarching story narrative that would make sense as a whole, but knew we'd make it up by mosaic stories, by little pieces. So we had to plot the whole thing out on paper. We were analog.
Yes, and we still do it that way too. We both like our paper.
So we would plot out the whole narrative arc, and then we would also plot out character arcs individually, and then we would work on the chapters one-on-one. So how would we start doing that for the individual chapters?
I think we sort of, as far as titles were concerned, if we had we had a line or a sentence that we both really liked, you know, like you had To That Man, My Better Counsel, which I think is from the sagas, and you had a really strong idea of what that story was going to be. I think Seeds was the start, and I had that idea and knew where to go with that. And Burning Seaweed for Salt, I had the story idea, but you had the awesome title.
Yeah, the title.
So, you know, we start from that point. We talked about the characters, and I think by the time we finished, it had pretty much naturally fallen. Half of the stories you started and half of the stories I started, because we knew
definitely
we had those seeds there. And then, so basically our process is to write until there's nothing there.
And I think also people find it interesting to find out how we pass the drafts back and forth. So one of us will start it because we have the idea, and then we'll kind of write until the ideas run out, and then pass it on to each other, so that it ends up being both of us working on the full draft. Instead, some people collaborate and do a full draft and then pass it on to their collaborator, but I think with us it's a lot more integrated than that.
It is, because once you get that, you know, say you get that 2,500 words back, you read over that, and that's one of the great joys of it, is seeing what the other person has done and what ideas are there. And I think that sparks so much of our creativity, is that bouncing off the ideas there. And so, you know, you get that 2,500 words and you read it and you edit it as you go, and as we know, we have a lot of comment bubbles as to...
Yeah, a lot of explanations as to why I've changed this.
And the history of box brooches in Norse culture, and things like that.
And also then trusting that if you do change something, or if I change something, we have the comment explanation, but it's also knowing that when we pass the draft to each other, it's implicitly trusting that the other person is going to make it better and not ruin it, which I think prevents a lot of people from collaborating.
Yeah, I think so, and it is. And by the time we finish, it's probably 10, 12 drafts over and over. So it's every word, every line, every sentence has been filtered and washed back and turned into that, what I like to think of as a flawless third voice, Angelissa.
Yeah, so. Which I think is actually a nice segue to the next point, which is us working on our own separate projects, because when we work together, we do get that third voice, but when we're working on our separate projects, we still get each other to critique, but we still sound like ourselves when we do so. So how is this different? How is our process different when we're working on our own projects?
There's no actual rewriting in the way that we do when we're collaborating, because again, when we write separately, we sound very, very different as writers. But again, there are a lot of suggestions, and maybe this word would be better, or maybe this, but you don't really, we don't change.
Yeah,
with
I think that's an important
impunity that like we do when we're collaborating. So. And as usual, it's a critique and it's commenting, it's suggestions. So you can go, I don't want to listen to you, or
and that is exactly, and that's a difference as well, because we give each other the full draft instead of just the work in process. Yeah, which can kind of throw you off if you exchange that too early. Yeah. But when it's our own projects, we'll exchange the full draft and then listen to each other's comments, but might not have to take them all the way that we do when we're working together. Yeah. We kind of have the benefit of going, I don't know what I'm going to do next, so I'll pass it over to Angela, and vice versa, and then you can add and change and rewrite whatever you want. But it's always, paragraph by paragraph or scene by scene, and you can jump around. Yeah. But when we're creating each other's work, it's always full draft, and
that's it.
Keep the flensing knives away.
Yes, and as we both know, your first drafts are much cleaner than mine, because you write.
I'm slow.
Yes, but you write slowly because you're crafting at that point, and I need instant gratification. I need to know that I have something finished, and I'm not a writer who hates writing. I like writing, but I love editing.
Yeah, me too.
So my time goes in more at the editing stage, I think.
Yeah, you get the burst of inspiration, then write 3,000 words, and then I go, I hate you for writing that so quickly.
But you have 1,000 perfect words, whereas I have 3,000 brown, ugly words.